Have you ever wondered what it really takes to raise a happy, well-trained puppy? I recently joined 5 other dog experts at the Puppy Blueprint virtual conference. We discussed all things puppies, including socialization, grooming, common training mistakes, sleep schedules, and much more. We also answered a few live audience questions addressing their specific puppy struggles. What stood out to me most about this discussion was that each expert brought their unique perspective to each question, which resulted in a fascinatingly diverse set of answers. Whether you're a new puppy guardian or a seasoned dog expert, I'm confident that you'll discover some tips, tricks, and insights in this conversation. This is a bit of a lengthy video, so to make it more structured, I've included timestamps below. Feel free to jump to the topics that interest you the most. Let's dive in.
I think I'd love to start off with what's one common myth or misconception about raising a puppy that you'd love to bust today? So everybody can answer. Some of you can answer whatever you would like. So hit me with your best shot. What's one of those common myths or misconceptions that you'd love to bust out today about puppy raising?
I would say that obedience has to come first. That's the one that I wanna bust.
Yeah.
Moving away from the need to teach the verbally cued sits and downs and stays, to a small puppy, instead just, asking yourself, does puppy know where the bathroom is? Do they know what stuff to put their teeth on? Are they developing trust for the people in the home? Do they feel safe in their environment? What kind of stuff makes them happy? What kind of stuff makes them stressed? I'd rather puppy parents really delve into that stuff. You have plenty of time for obedience to get creative and start, developing cued instructions and things like that. But I think that relationship portion and that those day-to-day life skills and observations are super important from my perspective.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree. Anybody else want to add anything to that? I'm a huge proponent of that as well.
I agree. I'm not a huge fan of the word obedience at all.
Yeah, same.
Um, they're living creatures. They're not going to do everything we ask every single time. I will often say to my puppy parents that you want your dog to want to work with you when they're an emotionally safe space.
Mhm.
Mm, yeah, absolutely.
I
I
think
love
I
that term
can,
emotionally safe space as well. I think that's so important to delve into, from a problem solving perspective and a relationship perspective.
and I agree. Like, I think more the behavior side rather than the quote unquote obedience. But like added to that, I also think there's a misconception that a lot of people wait for behavior training because they think that their puppy will automatically outgrow certain behaviors as they age, and that can be dangerous as well. I had a client that contacted me once for puppy biting, and it turned out the puppy was a year and a half old, and
Oh,
we had to have a discussion of like, this is no longer puppy biting. They probably started
yeah.
that way, but it had become a demand behavior. So just not taking too long to also work on the behaviors.
Yeah, and I do think
Yeah.
there's like a balance in there too, because like, I mean, if you've heard me talk before, you've heard me say this like a bunch of times. Like, I will interact with my puppies and we play, but I do this thing that I call play with purpose. We're playing stuff, but my puppies are also still learning. So we're developing a bond, we're developing a training bond at the same time, but we're not doing the sit down, like all of those things that typically come along with the commands, and we're just having fun. And we're also building that trust that we keep talking about, that bond that's really important. And I think when we build that bond, we do get a lot of other things that kind of come along. It doesn't mean that your puppy's going to learn everything through osmosis by any means, but I do think when we start building that trust, we're being a little bit more mindful of our interactions with our puppies as well. And so we're doing things a little bit more um, thoughtful when we do them, if that makes any sense.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
I
love the play with purpose stuff. Yeah, go ahead.
no, you're fine. I definitely think that, play with purpose is also kind of like stemming on the fact that I'll often get contacted by clients who their kids are also learning how to interact with their puppies, and they're doing a lot of like handsy stuff and like high-pitched voices and running and tracing. And sometimes, that developmental period, even depending on the breed or the age of the puppy, can start to stem into some pretty intense, like chasing behaviors and biting behaviors. And that's when I think that, sometimes it's okay to be like, hey, here are more intentional ways that we can interact with the puppy versus, promoting them to and encouraging them to do behaviors that we're really going to dislike in the future when we have a very large, like Stephanie said, 1.5-year-old puppy who is now an adolescent and still rehearsing these behaviors. And that doesn't necessarily mean that we're being, I guess, like punishing in that aspect, but they're not going to generalize well. Essentially, like it might be okay for one child to, be all handsy and kind of like play with their puppy, but then for another kid, it might be very scary. Like, let's say if they're, they have friends over or what have you. So I think that that is so important to really, work on as far as like playing with a purpose where, we can have that intention there, but we can also kind of help our puppy navigate what they're supposed to be doing in that moment, especially during play.
Yeah, because we can turn everything into a game. Like even going out the door is a game in our house. It's not stay at the door, sit, don't move, wait till I tell you to come out. We're working on door manners and not rushing out and getting lost and, pushing through and all of that. But we're doing it in more of a fun way. I think it's more like guiding versus, commanding what to do.
Well, I think
always,
too, we can accidentally be punishing by using a lot of words as well, right? Because if we think about what puppies are looking at from us, they're first and foremost looking at our body language. They're looking at understanding the associations and the outcomes, that happen from one event to another or one space to another, things like that. And so if we're saying a lot of words and they're like, wait, I'm looking at your body language doing this, but I'm hearing this stuff coming out of your mouth, and I'm still not sure what you're saying. We can maybe create a puppy that doesn't want to interact with us because it just feels like a lot of pressure and a lot of confusion. And then we've got puppy parents that are going, my puppy won't come to me, my puppy ignores me, or my puppy won't listen when I want them to do this. And I think sometimes it just takes us looking at how we're addressing our communication.
Yeah, that's a big one. I think also, and I always go with house training as being like the first interaction that people have with their puppies, right? Because that's so important to us. We don't want the pottying inside. And so we sometimes have these wonderful interactions with our puppies, but then when it doesn't go so well, we might lose our temper with our puppies. And so we can very much confuse our puppies with who we are, and we can get a puppy who starts to become unsure of us. We all know that that's not a look of guilt when the puppy chews the thing or pees and poops in the house. It's more of a look of fear because sometimes they don't know if they're getting, oh my gosh, there's my good girl. Oh, you're such a good girl. Or what did you do? Like the furrowed brow, the scrunchy nose, and the scrunchy face person. Like, who am I getting today? And that kind of goes along with what you were just saying, Jessica, about, and my big thing always is, a lot of people, and whenever we say we want people to help build their bond, I always know that people are saying like, well, my puppy loves me. But I always talk about how there's that bond where you're cuddling up on the couch together in the evening, but that is very different than that bond that you're creating with those interactions for training, a training bond, like you were saying, Jessica, about getting a puppy to come when called. Because if we're giving our puppy these conflicting messages, because they don't understand what we're saying. They see what we're doing, as you said, with body language. And so, well, I don't want to come to that person because they're kind of cranky. That's not fun. Like, right? Why would a puppy want to come if you're a little bit aggravated or irritated or, just kind of grumpy about your puppy and everything. So yeah, I think there's always that, like I talk about that training bond that's so important. And it doesn't mean that you don't love your puppy and you don't have that special cuddling on the couch. They're kind of two different things. It's a little similar, but a little bit two things.
Can I add in just on we started off with making sure we're not leaving things too late with training, and from the groomer's perspective, that's always a big one for me. So, often you're given this guideline by your breeder of like, oh, you know, they don't need to be clipped until they're 6 months old or 12 months old. It's something we hear really commonly. But what that neglects is the behavioral benefits of being groomed early. Yes, the puppy coat doesn't really matter until they get to about 8 or 9 months old. However, if they've never seen anything from a grooming setup and then suddenly they come in during that first fear period or during, you know, early teenager stage, then they've missed out on all of this chance to develop, you know, confidence within the grooming salon. So if there's, you know, one thing that I wish would stop being spread is this idea that they need to come in late. No, get them in as soon as they have their vaccination so that they can safely start being introduced to all of these things that are potentially scary.
I totally agree. And probably one of the myths that I'm not a huge fan of is socialization equaling socializing. And I think what you're talking about comes into that socialization, because we want our dogs to experience and get used to what their life is going to be with us, as opposed to just meeting as many dogs as possible. So all of my puppy preschool or puppy clients, I always recommend, if they're going to be taking the dog to the groomer, do it really early. Just take them in, even just for a little puppy nail clip or a little brush. And we actually do have a lot of groomers in my area that will just do a little puppy visit where they can come in, get loads of treats, have a little hairbrush, and have a little play with their nails.
Love that idea when it comes to socialization. Yeah, that you don't actually, I mean, obviously we have to find the right professional and find the right facility who will accommodate us. But I think that's such a creative way of socializing that many puppy parents may not be aware of, is that we can find a groomer to just say, hey, could I just bring him onto the van, you know, or bring him into the salon and have you just give him some yummy treats, and, you know, maybe the hairdryer is going on in the background, or, you know, we go into the vet and just sit in the waiting room for a little bit and then leave after 5 minutes. You know, those like cool, like little positive introductory experiences, so that then they're not thrown into that first experience with grooming or with the vet. And we can't, you know, obviously we can't avoid everything. We do the best we can, but you know, filling in those little gaps to make sure that we don't end up with a puppy then who is a bite risk for the groomer. Or gosh, I had a client ages ago who was a very sensitive white shepherd, and he had one bad experience at the vet and back chained it all back to the prep, and he stopped being willing to get in the car. Like, this dog would not get in the car because he was expecting, you know, to go to the vet. And so some dogs as well, you know, particularly if they're from a rescue and maybe we're not sure what the litter history is and everything, we're going to find puppies that are a little bit more sensitive than others, and they can really benefit from lots of those little baby steps in those experiences to prep them for sort of the real life needs.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm right there with you with the socialization. When I used to do a lot of behavior cases, I would see that most of the challenges that we were having stemmed from improper socialization. And of course, there's other things to take into consideration, as we know, like genetics and stuff like that. But I would just love if everybody would look at socialization differently. I would love if we looked at it as more confidence building, because when we think about socialization, our minds automatically go with interacting, right? Like social media, we interact, social gatherings, we interact. And when we have our puppies and we think about socialization, that's the first thing we want to do, is get them to interact. Whereas if we start thinking about confidence building, we're thinking about those little things like, how is my puppy going to feel about this? And we can introduce them in a more thoughtful way than kind of just like plunging them right into everything.
Yeah, well, and when we're thinking about socialization from a socializing or like direct contact kind of perspective, we can't always control the back end of that, right? So if we're like, oh, I want my puppy to meet as many people as possible, just gonna let them say hi to strangers and other dogs and things. But if you're not in control of how that person or how that other dog greets your puppy, then your puppy could have a really, you know, bad experience, and it wasn't your fault per se. It was just that we didn't maybe prep for that scenario or think from a perspective of, hey, my puppy can see other dogs and socialize with other dogs all day long. just looking at them, just watching the world go by, just having good experiences with other dogs in the picture. It doesn't have to involve those direct interactions.
Right.
I think also when you do allow that constant, you can go and introduce yourself to that person, you can go and play with that dog. It does build some frustration, reactivity later on as well, because
Yeah,
they're
for
so
sure.
used to being like, there's a dog, I'm allowed to go and play with it. And now you're saying, no, you can't. And then they're just like, but hold on. So I think, yeah, not only is it not about socialization, but it's also, sorry, not about socializing. It's also just about teaching them that you can be around people and you can be around dogs and you don't need to interact with them.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's also really difficult when that frustration-based reactivity does start, because then, not only do we have a puppy, we have a large dog now. Or, just kind of stemming at like thinking about dogs who do get bigger. But granted, what we've kind of created is this dog who is just like, I get to do whatever I want. And as someone who has a smaller dog on the more sensitive aspect of things, of not even being reactive, my dog's name is Potato. She's more like tolerant and selective, which is about like 80 to 90% of dogs in general. Like, not all dogs are truly friendly. And she does not appreciate those really frustrated greeters screaming and trying to like crawl toward her and huffing. And so that's what I really, really encourage my puppy parents to do is, like, hey, we don't always have to go to the isolated puppy play day and just constantly play and play and play and play and play. We can do other things around other dogs, like watching them. I know was brought up from a distance. Being around them is just fine. Other things we can do are like, hey, instead of, playing like crazy with your adult dog friend or older dog, like maybe instead we can do some like parallel enrichment activities where there's a management layer in play, but like you've got your little enrichment toy or your shreddy box or whatever over here, and then this dog does over here. So we create those interactions with a little bit more intention in mind. And that kind of reduces that frustration of not constantly getting access to those things.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. So another thing I'd love to kind of chat about a little bit is, because puppies are wonderful, but they can also be very overwhelming. So how can, and basically this goes into some of what we were just chatting about as well, like how can puppy parents balance the need for training with simply letting their puppies be puppies?
I
Always
like to
awkward.
just
Go
make
ahead.
sure that, oh, I know we keep speaking at the same time. Sorry, Ashley. I was
you're
just going to
good.
say, I think environmental management is a big one. Because I usually say to people, look, if you've puppy proofed and it's safe and you've taken your puppy to the bathroom, obviously depending on whether you're interacting inside or out, just let them explore, let them do their thing, because then it gives you the option, not only to not worry as much as possible because you've prepared your environment for that, but also you put yourself in a really powerful position by being able to just observe, because sometimes we just need to quiet our brain, don't we, and just go, hey, look, I'm just not gonna try to do anything right now. I'm just gonna watch puppy make his choices. I can then take the opportunity to say, what a good boy, you're putting your mouth on a toy right now. Like capturing really good behaviors, giving them feedback when you see them doing stuff that you really like, and then also noticing where they might need a little help in redirecting them away from, oh, oops, yes, the table leg is still really attractive to you, or that patch of grass is really stinky and wet today. I'm seeing that you want to dig in that, and so you put yourself in a place where you can really observe and problem solve and communicate, but in kind of just a really nice casual way without having like a major agenda.
Yeah, I think that that balance is really important, because to me, I think that puppies and dogs, just kind of on that whole scope, they're making good decisions all the time. Sometimes we're just kind of like, oh, I have a moment to breathe. So I think it's unfortunately when we start to notice more of like our no, stage of things, like, no, I don't want you doing that. No, I don't want you doing that. But how about if, for example, like I do this probably at every first lesson or every first puppy lesson I go to, which is like, if the puppy's sitting there watching me talk to my clients, I'm throwing treats at the puppy because I'm like, yay, good for you. Like, this will be a situation in the future that I'm sure that they're not going to want their puppy barking or jumping on the person or doing whatever. If they're like even just standing there, I think that those are always really good moments to reinforce. But, sometimes they're making these like, for example, like I can train a dog and have a conversation at the same time, but to get that into our puppy parents like repertoire can be kind of challenging. But once you start really working on those good decisions and reinforcing those, that will just make things a heck of a lot easier.
Yeah, I
I
think that
agree.
really helps with everyone's optimism too, doesn't it? To go, hey, let me switch my mindset. I'm so used to maybe looking for the stuff I need to tell my puppy that they're doing wrong, because obviously we don't want puppies chewing on the table leg. But we've got to start thinking about noticing what they're doing right. And then that's how you find that balance in allowing them to be puppies and also instilling the training, because they're learning 24/7, right? All the time. We don't get to say, from 2 to 3 it's training time. Like, they're learning and behaving and you're technically training all day long. So I think this is a super cool, easy way of just saying, hey, be a puppy. Let me notice what you do great and give you feedback. Let me redirect and problem solve over maybe the mistakes that you're making. And then, training just happens.
I want to add to that too. Like I always tell puppy parents that you might know that you're trying to have a formal training session, but if you do it correctly, the puppy won't know that because it's just going to look like it's a good time. So like if you have their meal, you could practice sitting, and it's just a way of incorporating the things that you're going to do throughout the day anyway that are required into training. Or if you're having, a tug session, practice drop it. And the puppy's not going to have any idea that they're being trained. They're just having a great time with you and doing puppy things.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
And we tend to take for granted the things that our puppies do right? Because when they're doing the things that we want, we're kind of like, oh, thank God. And we don't have to manage it. And so we take that for granted that that's what they should be doing, but the puppy doesn't know that that's what they should be doing. And so when we do give them that feedback, as you were saying, and we reinforce them in some way, that behavior is going to continue because the puppy's going to be like, oh, I got some treats for just laying over here and watching out the window. That's pretty cool. And because we always work on this window here because it's the whole window to the world. And so we always work on watching out the window and getting reinforced. And then I eventually get dogs who don't bark at every little thing that goes on out there. Their dogs are going to bark sometimes, but they're not sitting here watching at Sentry because I've just taught them that chilling out over here is the great thing that happened. And it wasn't a formal training that I did. I just captured those behaviors that I liked because I knew that's something I was going to be important to me in the future.
Yeah.
I agree. Like, I have a lot of people that I'm like, your puppy's just sitting there relaxing, like give it some treats. And they're like, but they're not doing anything. That's what you want.
Yes, they are.
The
that
nothing
is what you want.
behaviors, right? We
The
want
nothing.
those. We're going to want those
Exactly.
more and more as they get older.
Yeah. You're going to appreciate that. I've just been dealing with one of my dogs, and I would love for him to be able to do a little bit more of nothing. But he doesn't think nothing's a good thing to do.
Sometimes those nothing behaviors don't happen very often in the beginning, do they? Or they're like literally 5 seconds long. And that I think can be the challenging part when you have a really like wired puppy, or you have like a very like switched on breed or something. But if you can just find it anywhere in the day and just have your little jar, you're not having to run to the cupboard and dig out a treat bag. I tell puppy parents, strategic placement of jars of treats, like in every room of the house, right? So that you're literally like, oh my God, puppy's laying on the rug. Ninja feed. Like, it's literally, it's happening all the time. And then those 5-second increments will become 10-second increments, and they will become 15 minutes, increments and things like that. I remember having it was an adult dog, but who had a very difficult time with the nothing behaviors. And that moment when I caught him laying on a bed in the yard unsupervised was like that moment where you just want to cry with pride, And so I think it's cool to know that you could look forward to those feelings as a puppy parent because of just those little wins here and there that accumulate over time.
And that's like a huge thing that I hope everybody takes away from this is have those little snackety snacks all around the house strategically placed. When we have a puppy, we've got like all those like little like Rubbermaid, Gladware, Ziploc disposable kind of tiny containers. They are all over the house. I've got them in my kitchen. You would think I had like flour, sugar, brown sugar on the counter. No, those canisters have treats in them. They don't have any cooking ingredients in them. They're all treats. And I've got them hidden all around the house when I've got a puppy. They're, in the office cabinet. They're under the bathroom sink. They're in the media room. They're everywhere. So I can reinforce those behaviors that I like as part of that, just like you said, training is 24/7 with your puppy because they don't know that we're training at this time. They are learning all day long. And so we can actually help teach them by rewarding the heck out of the things that we like. This guy here who's on my lap right now, you'd swear he's never eaten. He's starved to death. And at mealtime, he would always get very excited. And I would just randomly reinforce him for sitting in this one part of the kitchen. And now, fast forward, if I go in the kitchen and there's anything that I'm going to do, I just look over and he's sitting there like, hey, I'm just hanging over here. So we've inadvertently taught a like quote unquote mat training, but it's not something that I actively really worked at. I was just rewarding what I liked. And now I have this behavior that whenever I go into the kitchen and it's mealtime, he just hangs out over there. That's all he does. He just waits.
Yeah. And you did that via him just enjoying it too, right? Which goes back to what we were saying earlier about training, that you didn't have to put the pressure of like these formal criteria increments and verbal cues and things. You would just like, hey, I love that, reinforce. Hey, I love that, reinforce. And then eventually he's like, I'm pretty sure this is a valuable place for me to be.
Yeah,
And it just evolved that way.
Exactly, because I wasn't like, you need to do this or you need to do that. When he would come over to where the food bin was, he'd be very overzealous about the whole thing. And so I would just take a couple of treats and I would scatter them over here away. And I'd check out and I would just keep doing that. And then the one day I looked around and I was like, well, where is he? Well, there he was, just sitting there all sweet and dapper, like, hi, I'm over here. And of course, what did I do? Yes, you. I rewarded the heck out of that for him. And so now doesn't matter how excited it is. I'm telling you, he thinks he's going to miss a meal. You would think he never was fed. If I was to go in and it was mealtime now, he might come running in all excited, like, yay, it's dinner. But if I look around and I look for him, he's hanging out over there. He's just waiting. He's just waiting for his dinner.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. And there was no formal training. Like I said, I call it my sloppy training. I just rewarding what I like. I have no formal plan written out.
Yeah, I literally just had one of those moments because my partner's dog is very sensitive to like squeaky brakes on school buses and garbage day and things like that. So we have treat jars in our house and they're all over, and she heard a noise outside while you were talking, Kelly, and she looked at me and was like, and I'm like, yay, good job, everybody. So those are like little tiny things that you reinforce throughout your day that if I hadn't been doing this since we started living here like 6 months ago, she would have had an explosion and I would have had to turn my microphone off. But that has significantly reduced over time because I have too many of these to-go cups in my house. And I was like, these are all treat jars now. So little things that you can do.
Yeah.
I love those little mason jars as well, where you can separate the lid from the rim.
Yes.
Because it's like so quiet, like you don't have to make any noise. You're literally like, a treat has appeared under your nose. And there was no like predictive, stuff that went on beforehand that got them up out of the moment,
Yeah. And I think kind of just to sum that up, our puppies are with us all day. And so it doesn't have to be as difficult as sometimes as we make it out to be, like very segmented. Just find the opportunities to reward the things that you like during the day, whether it's, behavior at the door, behavior coming inside, or when you're the puppy drops the toy when you're playing, and you're not playing like, try to get it back from the puppy or things like that. Like all these interactions that we have with our puppies, they are learning moments, they are teaching moments. And so a lot of times people will say, well, how often do you train your puppies during the day? And I'm like, well, sometimes I have purposeful sessions where I'm like, I'm gonna work on this, but I'm just doing little things throughout the day here and there. That's it. And so by the end of the day, I could have a good 20 minutes or 30 minutes of training in, but I've done like literally 3 seconds here and 1 minute here and 15 seconds there. Just all of these learning moments with my puppy during the day. Our time is going quick. We've only got a half hour left. So I definitely want to make sure that we get to, I think I got more people coming in. I would definitely want to make sure that we get to some other questions that I know I've hinted about. So I know they're going to be anxious about those. What is your favorite enrichment activity? And how do you incorporate it in your training plan? Like, is it an activity on its own, or is it also a teaching skill?
I'll jump in on this one because I love enrichment stuff, and I must apologize. It's very early here, so I'm kind of like I'm here, but I'm also half asleep. So I'm trying to contribute where I can. So my favorite enrichment ever is scatter feeding. It's just so easy. So what that involves is just grabbing a handful of treats or kibble or whatever your dog eats and throwing it on the ground, on the lawn. It takes 2 seconds to do, and it makes their mealtime longer. It makes it more enriching for them, but also you can utilize it in a lot of different training protocols. So in the grooming salon, I use scatter feeding a lot, as a reset when I'm working with a dog to, desensitize them to the scissors or something like that. I will use a scatter feed to get them up and moving and then see whether they choose to come back. You can also use it during desensitization. So if you're, say, desensitizing to the blow dryer or something like that and trying to build confidence with the blow dryer, then having the blow dryer running while they're doing a scatter feed and picking all of that food up and having lots of nice success by finding all of these things. But then you can also use it when you're out on walks and, oh, look, there's something really exciting happening over there. But we're just going to hang out here and you're going to root around for some food and we don't need to worry about what's happening over there. I just think it has so many different applications. And if there is one thing that I think every person should learn to do with their dog, it's just automatic in my house now. Oh, there's a thing happening over there. I'm just going to throw some food and off you go. I think learning to have that as an automatic mechanism almost is fantastic.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of scatter feeding as well. I actually used it with my sensitive adult guy because he used to bark at the fences. And so it was just a matter of getting him to rehearse doing something that wasn't that. So we just used to have breakfast, scatter feeding. Therefore, he was scatter feeding, rehearsing scatter feeding in that space in replacement to barking at the fences. And for puppies specifically, one of my little like fallback plans for people who have a bit of a sharky puppy, if they get like overstimulated fast and you like literally can't redirect them off of your ankles, scatter feed, right? Go get it and just toss a whole bunch of food. Allows you then to redirect them, get out of the space and kind of reassess what you're going to do next. So yeah, scatter feeding is like a huge versatile winner for every dog.
Yeah, I call that the get out of jail free card.
Right.
Absolutely. And I think also it's really helpful if you do have something that kind of scary that happens that you don't have much control over. I've used it in the past when there's been fireworks suddenly occur in the area. It's like, oh no, fireworks. Well, here, have this. And suddenly that really scary thing had something positive come out of it. And so you see them go, oh my God, that was really worrying. Oh, hang on there. It's raining food now. So you can do that again in the grooming salon if you do have an emergency situation, say where the dog has a nail curled around and they need it to be cut, but they might find the nail trim a bit stressful. You can get that done, then go, oh, wow, but it's raining food. And often they're just so sidetracked from the fact that they're doing that scatter feed.
Yeah. And I
I
love,
call that the don't worry, eat some food scenario.
yeah. And
Something bad happens, you're like, don't worry, eat food.
yeah. And I love
And
it
you can
because
just get them sniffing.
what I'll do with that is I'm a big proponent of I'll pair that in those situations. So it's nothing for me to be out in public and then something startling happened and I see a dog who's spooked. I go, wee! Because in our house, when something happens like that, when we have a puppy, where so if I had a puppy right now, our neighbors were having some work done just the other day for a couple of days, and there was a lot of loud noises going over there, and some of it was these big like droppy sounds, like huge metally type droppy sounds, and that could be a little scary for a puppy. And if that was the case, then I would, if the puppy looked over, I would go, "Wee," and then throw some food. So I eventually start conditioning this wee word. So if we were to go out now, Toast is now 5. If we were to go out now and something would happen, all I'd have to do is go wee, and she automatically looks to me, and she's like, "Yeah." So, and then I could follow up with a few tidbitty morsels if I needed to or wanted to help counteract something that might have been scary. But we've got that wee in our pocket that now has been conditioned because of that scatter feed as well.
Yeah. And I'd love to
I think
piggyback on the food foraging idea too, because one thing I do with all my puppies, but will work for all age groups of dogs, is like scent work, right? Or like scent work with novelty, because then you're adding in socialization stuff to the foraging. So particularly, before your puppy's fully vaccinated and you're like, oh, I'm in this weird zone right now. I can feel my puppy getting cabin fever, but I can't really take them to the park yet and things like that. Or you just want to get into that creative part of socialization where you're introducing them to just kind of worldly things, boxes, muffin pans, saucepans, anything that you'll find in your recycling, basically, right? And you just create a little search space. You use their meal, so you don't have to use like a whole extra bunch of treats. Um, like Emma said, it takes them a good period of time then to just search, and then they have control over all of the things that move and rustle and make noise. And ooh, there's bubble wrap under my feet, and ooh, that makes a noise when my nose touches it, or that feels cold, or and you just guiding them through exploring just random worldly things while having a meal. So that's one of my favorites.
Yeah, I think that enrichment sometimes is often viewed as kind of like a distraction for our puppies and dogs because it's like, oh, I just need you to do this thing. And that can kind of get misconstrued sometimes because then we have a dog who won't lick a frozen Kong when a guest is over because that guest is so novel and cool. So I think that reviewing it and talking to puppy parents about it as like these are daily needs that they need to be able to forage and shred and chew and dissect and do all these things that are species specific, but how can we figure out what they really enjoy doing in ways that are safe for them? Like I say this about when I've got really like people just so frustrated and agitated with their puppies because they're starting to get excited and find out how cool digging is in their yards. And I'm like, okay, well, let's regroup here and, designate them an area where digging is acceptable. Whether that be creating a dig pit for them or doing some sort of like, I actually did see someone teach their dog how to help them garden. And that was massive because she was like, digging these giant holes in their yard because she was so frustrated. But they're like, well, what if we taught her how to like help us dig holes? And it completely reduced that behavior. So I think that looking at as a way to, you're going to do this thing, how can I make this enriching and safe for your life? Where, my household and my things and my other, people in my house are all safe. And I also think that recycling enrichment is so underrated and sometimes it's misconstrued as, well, we're just letting our dogs play with trash. But I think that whenever I come into these houses with people, who have toys everywhere, and we've got a puppy who's just so like, but I really want to chew on like this nice thick piece of like rug. You know what I mean? So finding new textures and things for them to chew on that are just as easy as us sorting through our recycling and making sure it's safe and supervising it makes a huge world of difference.
Yeah. And I
You
want
don't want to
to
have to spend a ton of money either, do you? So, like, my dogs, one of their
Exactly.
favorite activities was just to eat their food out of an egg carton. It was the easiest, like, cheapest thing in the world, and they loved it. And, obviously, Ashley, like you said, it has to be safe. We don't want our puppies to be
Mhm.
tearing up things and then eating it. But they just happened to not, they were shredders, but
Mhm.
they didn't consume things. So they would have the best time figuring out to flip the egg carton and open it, and not only did they get to eat the food, then they got to tear it up into tiny pieces and throw it everywhere. And it was going to go in the trash anyway. I don't mind clearing up a
Mhm.
little cardboard. And they had a great time.
Yeah. And I want to just
And
address, like when you were talking about the digging before, because I know sometimes I've come across where puppies are chewing things or they're digging, and we make these suggestions about giving them cardboard and macaroni and cheese boxes and cereal boxes. Like all my stuff gets shredded, pre-shredded. I don't have to break down boxes for recycling. My dog does it for me. Or making them a dig pit. Sometimes we often hear that, well, isn't that just going to encourage them to dig more or chew more? No, they're already doing it. So
Mhm.
They're going to do
we're
it anyway.
finding an outlet for them to do it, right? So giving them a box or an egg carton isn't going to make them chew your house more. They're already doing it, driving you crazy. Or
Mhm.
giving them that dig pit in the yard isn't going to make them dig more. They're already doing it and ruining your landscaping and your mulching, and you're getting frustrated. We're just channeling these internal needs to a more productive way that they can do the things they need to do without driving us crazy.
Exactly. And as
Yeah.
a behavior professional, I will say that no matter what you find online, I have watched all of those indestructible toys be destroyed. So,
Not indestructible. There are
Yeah.
none. So,
Especially if
um,
you've got bully breeds.
yeah, exactly.
exactly.
There are none. I actually just because my bully breeds are a little bit older now, and I actually just bought some new toys where they said, they're made for bully dogs, and I don't believe they called them indestructible. They do guarantee them though, and I went, I, I shall let you know how they do with these.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's fun.
Well, and I want to add to that too, like you were talking about, enrichment is basically anything that meets a natural need. And I think one of the things people forget is that, you might have this tiny Chihuahua puppy and it's hard to imagine that they descended from a wolf long ago, but they did. And like,
Yeah.
so even though we meet dogs' calorie needs, like they still have that predatory sequence desire. So Ashley was
Mm.
mentioning about dissection and chasing. And so my favorite enrichment, and probably I'm particular to this because I have a corgi cattle dog, so her desire to chase is off the charts for her prey drive. But anything that sort of meets those predatory needs, but in a way that we deem acceptable. So if, my dog chasing after a frisbee or after a fur toy, really great because you can incorporate that as like a functional reward during training, whether, have a different breed of dog that might be tug, but really using play to kind of meet those so-called wolf instincts at home. And usually it really, really helps. I think it was you, Kelly, that mentioned that people are concerned it's going to amplify behaviors. And I hear that too, that if you let your dog chase or tug, like you're going to make them more prone to trying to go after your cat in your home or the squirrels outside. And it's often the opposite. Like I always say, kind of you're draining that prey drive battery every time that
Mm.
you offer the safe outlet for it instead. So let
Right.
your dog feel like a little wolf every day and their behavior gets a lot better.
Yeah, because channeling that behavior, because people say, oh, but I don't want them to chase cars, so I don't want them to chase the frisbee, or I don't want to play with the flirt pole because it's going to encourage the chase behavior. They're already doing it.
Mhm.
They're already trying to
I will
satisfy.
say though, I will say though, when it comes to energy levels though, right? So like if you are worried you have a really high energy dog and you're worried that this is going to promote those sort of arousal levels, if you will, you can get creative with your enrichment and make sure that the scales are always tipped to sort of calm or passive energy levels. There's dogs that I wouldn't give a treat tumble to, for example, like the
Mhm.
ball with the hole in that is made of vinyl plastic and just is going to roll across your wood floors and create a lot of arousal and speed and kind of the dog running around and obviously puppy joints as well. You don't want them slipping around on something like a wood floor. But I like to tip the scales toward the foraging behaviors and the sniffing behaviors and the licking and the chewing and all of those lovely passive calm things where they're a little bit more slow and stationary. And then you're also meeting all of those kind of wolfy needs. getting them to express natural behaviors and get outlets for all of the things that they innately desire, but you're not necessarily promoting these big like bursts of energy to where then you have difficulty calming them down for their nap afterwards,
Yeah.
I
And
think
go ahead.
that enrichment is like a really good way to teach those calm behaviors, and I think it is really overlooked a lot. So I'll quite often go to people's houses and they will be like, my dog's just over the top energetic and they're using a wobbler and a treat ball because those are the things that they've seen a lot of, and I'm like, let's put those aside for now and just go with like an actual Kong or a topple and treat calm, reward calm behavior that way. But also that probably the other thing that we have talked about a bit is just remembering that enrichment is not solely about food. There's so many ways to enrich your dog's life without food, and harnessing your dog's natural behaviors is really important. And it can be really beneficial. As someone who has trained my dog to dig a hole for her in the garden, it can be really beneficial to your life. Like, we have clay gardens here in Wellington, and my dog will just get in there and dig a hole. So finding what they like to do a lot of, and letting them do that. My pointer loves to point, so she gets enrichment just by pointing at things. So I think being aware of what your dog's natural behaviors would potentially be, and finding ways to use those to enrich your dog's life as well.
Yeah. In the
Yeah,
summer.
I like that because sorry,
Yeah.
Kelly, go
I
ahead.
was gonna say in the summertime here, we do, my dogs love the water and we don't have a pool. So we'll sometimes go to the river, but that's not always convenient. And so you'd think I had like small children that lived at home, but I don't. I have slip and slides and I have big pools and I have, and I literally set them out. We have our own like water park and my dogs will play on the slip and slides and they will run through the sprinklers and they will go in the baby pools and play and everything. And that is a huge part of what we do in the summertime because they enjoy it so much. And then sometimes they'll just run around and play, and then they'll go in the baby pool and they'll cool off a little bit or play on the slip and slide. And sometimes they're just playing in the water. They love it.
Has to be enriching to the individual, doesn't it? So what you guys just said was really important. My pointer loves to point, right? Like, what does your individual like to do? Because I hear some people saying, oh, the Kong didn't work, or, this other thing didn't work. And it's like, that's okay. It doesn't mean enrichment in general now does not work for your dog. It just means that you haven't tapped in yet to like what your particular dog is really fulfilled by.
Yeah, it's like making your child go to ballet when they don't want to do ballet, they want to be a gymnast. Like, we have to find the right activity that's gonna make them happy and fulfill that need.
Yeah, having two dogs that ate so insanely fast, and for me being like, oh, I need to get slow feeders. For my oldest dog, Layla, it worked like charm. But then when I got Potato, she was actively flipping them over because she was so frustrated by this little flower that was holding all of her food. So I had to find other ways to make it easier for her. Versus, and like, she loves to forage now. Like, she loves a good scatter in the grass. She'll be out there forever. But I had to find ways instead of making it more difficult because I needed her to not ingest everything in 10 seconds, but I was just causing kind of like further frustration from her versus, meeting that actual need. And she's also not really big on like chewing things, but she does really love to shred. I came home the other day and she had torn up, unfortunately, just some coupons that I'd gotten from the mail. And like, she's almost 8. I thought that was hilarious. So I was like, oh, I was going to throw these away anyway, but thanks.
Oh, so does anybody have another enrichment activity that they like that we might not have talked about? I think we're all big proponents of foraging. We play foraging games every day in our home here. We played like about 20 to 12. We played one here to as part of our.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Not to start a whole nother discussion about enrichment things. So probably the other things we've talked about, scatter feeding and sort of noisy type things and stuff like that. One of my next all favorite things is tasting platters. And I think it's really a good time as a puppy to sort of let them experience different types of foods and stuff with a tasting platter as well.
Yeah, and I know you talk about that in your segment that's going to come up. So
Yes.
maybe spoiler alert.
Yeah.
Be talking about that in her
Yeah.
session. So I'd love to squeeze in if we could. What your favorite skill is to teach, and again, how are you incorporating that into your training plan? Is it like a standalone skill, or are you integrating it in another way as some kind of activity or goal? We kind of sort of talked about that a little bit before, but I kind of like to, because people do obviously want to teach their puppies things, so I'd love to kind of talk about skills for a moment.
I would say, just to keep it kind of short and sweet, the most underrated skills to teach very early is, just because we have a groomer here, is cooperative handling and getting comfortable with that. Just in and of itself, handling will never not be a thing that your dog has to go through in their life, whether it be putting on their collars or harnesses, clipping their leashes, looking in their ears to see if like that's bothering them, touching their feet, having strangers touch their feet. So I think that in general, handling is one of the best things that you can teach your puppy, your new rescue dog that comes into your life, and learn about their body language and how you can make it at least it's never going to be like a fun thing for everybody, but I think that at least making it a low key and as tolerable experience as possible is a very important skill for every dog.
Yeah, and that goes for the short-haired dogs too, because a lot of times people think that they have the short-haired dog, so it doesn't really apply to them because they don't need to do the grooming, but they're still bathing and nail clipping and some general care like vet stuff and everything like that. So doesn't matter if you have a short-haired dog, it's super important for them as well.
Yeah, I agree with all that handling stuff, and part of that, a bit of puppy and a bit of owner is letting the puppy realize that they can say no to things as well. Like if they're not enjoying something, they can say no. And on the flip side, teaching puppy parents that it's okay if your puppy says no, you can put that aside, and try again once the puppy has calmed down.
Yeah.
One of my favorite things to teach is sort of small but relatively powerful in the scale of things, and that's something that we might call transitions. So this is like literally the space, that moment in time, like between events, right, or between actions. How many dogs do you know that when you pick up the leash, they're like, oh, the leash, or you put on the leash and they're like bolting for the front door, or just being able to control them when the car door or the front door opens. And that's that little moment. It's not the event or the thing itself, but it's just the moment of breathing space in between those two events. And we all live busy lives, so of course we're in a hurry to get things done as well. But if you can slow down yourself, you can slow down your puppy. And so it's maybe a matter of, hey, I've picked up the leash. What choice are you going to make? Oh, great, it's nice and calm. Let's go ahead with the next step and put the leash on. What's your choice now that I've put the leash on? Okay, great, you're nice and calm. Let's proceed to the door. What's your choice here now that we're at the door? Okay, great, it's nice and calm. We'll go ahead and open the door. Right. So you're seeing this like flow from step to step, and you're segmenting things a little bit, not in an inconvenient way, just in a way of making sure that your dog is going from event to event in a calm way, not like stacking excitement to excitement to excitement. And then like by the time you get out the door, they're like, wow, like pulling you down the street. So just those like kind of little, I call it the cement between the bricks. The bricks is the stuff, like the events, but the cement, you can't build a wall with bricks and no cement. So that's kind of like my analogy for those transitions.
Nice. Anyone
I
else?
call all of those things having no like of little consequence to you. Just teaching your puppy that even though you're getting that lead is of no consequence to you until it's part of you, essentially. Or people coming to the door, doesn't matter. It's got nothing to do with you. You don't need to worry about that. It's of no consequence. So just, I guess, a different a different name. It's very practical in what I call everything. So yeah, just no fancy names. yeah, just being like, that's of no consequence. Let's just not worry about that and be nice and calm.
None of your business.
I
I'll
think
just
on
quickly.
the cooperative
Oh.
behaviours topic, which, sorry, Stephanie, of course, is what I'm super passionate about. Another thing that's really important is keep teaching a calm stationing behaviour. Because often, if we can have a certain place where we do the grooming stuff, we want that to be a calm place. Particularly, it's a big thing I see in young puppies where they're coming into the salon and they're on the table and they're running around and they're crazy and they're excited. It's like, yeah, we want it to be a really positive experience, but a calm, positive experience, because trying to groom a dog that is doing backflips, not my favorite thing to do. So if we can teach a calm mat behavior where we are handling the dog, of course, we need to have other mat areas that they go where they're not being touched and that's their private space, but being on a mat or a towel or on a low table or something like that. And while you're there, we're going to be nice and calm. We're going to be doing some licking activities, or we're going to be having very slow treats dispensed in that area in a non-exciting manner, which then incorporates into that cooperative care, which then incorporates into vet handling, grooming, that kind of thing.
I was going to add, so I think mine would be, I guess most people probably call it like impulse control, but like leave it training. So having a verbal cue where you can ask your dog if there's something that they're interested in, asking them to leave it alone. I do teach it as a standalone skill so that it works on, I call them sidewalk snacks. So if you're out walking your dog and there's something that your dog is interested in that you really don't want them to go for, having that leave it cue so you don't have to use leash tension. But then I also do incorporate it back to the prey drive, but into prey drive training. So I used it at the beginning when I was asking my dog to not chase after squirrels, just so that I could get her to have repetitions of the behavior I want, which is look at the squirrel, but don't go after it. And after enough repetition, it often becomes that default behavior. So it was really useful for me for things like, yeah, animal chasing and things that I didn't want to have to intervene with the rest of her life.
Anybody else? I've lost track if we all kind of did our favorite skills. Did you guys, everybody share their favorite skill? Did we miss anybody? So of course, everybody went first. So they all kind of took some of my favorite skills. So I'm going to add in, I am going to add in, kind of goes along with the handling part of it is, look, when you have a puppy, they love to bite the leash. They love to try to bite the harness. They love to try to bite the towel that you're trying to dry them off with. I love to use a treat scatter in combination with these kinds of things, because what I'm now doing is keeping the sharky puppy bitey teeth away from my hands when I'm trying to clean off, the wet paws or the muddy paws or the wet body or getting on that leash. So I do that little treat scatter and then I wipe a paw, but my puppy is also learning to get their paws wiped off and get, between the toes and cleaned off, or they're getting that harness put on. So I've put the treat scatter on the floor and now I'm putting that harness on and they're hearing that clip of the harness, or they're feeling me kind of futz around with trying to make sure that it's straight, to leaning over them to get that on. And eventually what I get when I do that is I'm associating this. So it's kind of a bit of socialization in there, right? Confidence building with the harness or the collar or the leash being put on. I'm also keeping the puppy away from biting all of these things, the towel, the leash, the harness. And what I eventually get is a dog who will stand there while I clean off each paw, because to them it's just spa day. They get shammied off and they're not trying to eat the towel and they're just standing there waiting for it. So if it was raining outside right now and it was time to come inside, my dogs would literally just stand there with their 2 feet on this one step in the garage and they'd be just waiting for their whole little chamois experience to have each foot done and their toes cleaned off and their heads wiped off. And we do this very sweet, gentle, like the little towel on the head. And we're like, oh, does that feel good? And we're wiping it all down. And so that kind of helps with some of that handling stuff as well. I'm going to ask if anybody's got any questions. We'll see if I think somebody had to go. Was it Jessica? Did you have to go? I can't remember. Somebody had to go. If you have to go, that's okay. I figured if anybody's got any questions, we can open it up. We could take a couple of questions for a few minutes. So if anybody has anything they want to ask, they could put it in the chat. That might make it easier than everybody maybe coming off mute and talking over each other. So if anybody's got anything they want to ask us about anything we chatted about, go ahead and stick that in the chat and we'll see about getting your question answered.
I do have to go, but this was really awesome, and thanks for having me.
Yes, thank you for being here.
Yeah, of course.
Oh, hold on. They're coming in now. Hold on. How do you make a schedule to so the puppies learn to have quiet time?
I think that goes into general routine structure, doesn't it? If you know, I'm not a huge fan of like militant predictability necessarily, but I think with puppies we do need a lot of structure because they need to know what you expect from one, time, thing to another. They need to know what to expect so that they feel safe, and so that they can learn right via that repetition and that scheduling. So, Leslie, in the same way as you have a schedule for your pottying, that's the one thing we're being really, really pretty strict about. Go ahead and implement a schedule for your nap times as well. So, even if your puppy's not crate trained yet, you can use a pen, you can use a little gated space. Think about what helps your puppy wind down into quiet as well. Earlier we were talking about energy levels and things. I like to have a pre-nap routine or like a bedtime routine. So we're not just going from, hey, we're playing fetch and now it's time for quiet time. Goes back to those transitions as well. So like wind your puppy down. Could be something like a scatter feed, couldn't it? Because that's nice and calm. And then into awesome feeding on a mat, and just helping them wind down so that then they can learn to have longer and longer periods of successful quiet time. But I think it's just learning what helps your puppy to wind down as well so that that quiet period is successful. Does that make sense?
I agree with that. But also, like when I'm trying to encourage people to give their dogs rest, I'm always like, give them something in their pen that is a sort of a standalone thing that they can do by themselves, whether that's chewing on something or licking a licky mat, just nice calm behaviors that they can go in there and do, and eventually they will get into that sort of like, oh gosh, now I'm tired. And it's important to know when your puppy is getting tired, when all that sort of ratty behavior starts. It's generally because they've done too much or they're too tired, and it takes them longer to wind down. So making sure you're giving them enough sleep time so they don't become too over the top, that they can't calm themselves down. So just popping them
Some
in the
puppies
pen.
need more breaks than others, don't they?
Yeah,
So some puppies are
exactly.
like they can go for a bit and handle various levels of stimulation, and then other puppies are like, I'm gonna bite you because I am tired after 10 minutes of you giving me information.
Yep.
And so yeah, I love that about the chewing and the quiet activities because a lot of puppies
Mm,
need help in self-soothing. It's like giving
yep.
a small child a passy, right?
Exactly.
They can't always do that by themselves. We give that benefit of the doubt to human toddlers, and we don't often afford that enough to our puppies.
Yeah, exactly.
And
Yeah,
that helps
I
a lot.
actually do encourage like a pretty, especially when they're really young puppies, like a pretty set schedule for when you're going to try to offer sleep. Just because even as humans, like puppies are so cute, we end up wanting to be around them, and we accidentally keep them awake too long because it's very, very rare for puppy to be able to fall asleep if there's any sort of fun activity, including humans around them. So having that scheduled time where this is going to be, puppy going to a quiet zone, and I think reminding puppy parents that it's also a really positive thing that you're doing. Like they need an extraordinary amount of sleep for brain development and proper behavior and all this stuff. So you're really giving them that chance to grow appropriately by having them on a pretty strict nap schedule. I also
Mm.
have a 6-month-old human baby right now, so I'm seeing that in that like that aspect as well. And schedules for the win.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely highlighting how much sleep a puppy needs is really important, because people just have no idea that the majority of their time is going to be sleeping, and they keep them up to play and do lots of fun with things with them, and then they just get these behavioral problems from just doing too much. So
And the
yeah,
more they
definitely
do as
recommending.
well, right, the more they accumulate and accumulate all of that stimulation and the
Mm.
doing and the moving, and that's what they're rehearsing, and then they're gonna have more and more difficulty coming down. The higher you bring them up, for the longer you bring them up, the longer they will take to come down. And that could be potentially why achieving quiet time is a struggle, because they're just that those periods in between are just way too stimulating.
Yeah. And when Kazoo was a puppy, we always had our morning nap time, and he didn't go down for a nap at that time. But sometimes I would have to put up a gate because with two dogs in the house, even if he was trying to rest, she might encourage him, or he might then not sleep because she's trying to rest, but he's trying to get her to play. And so we would have to put up a gate. So it was kind of like we're managing that situation. He's like, oh, not playtime. Okay, I'll lay over here and then I'll take my nap. But he always went down for his nap at lunchtime. We'd go outside. We would do a very small play session. He would come in, he'd have his lunch. We'd wait a little bit. He'd go out, he'd potty again, and then he'd go in for his nap. And he'd always get something in there, like a bully stick, a marrow bone, a earth animal, no hide, whatever it was. And he would go down for like 3.5 hours for his lunchtime nap. And he would not get that kind of sleep if I didn't have him go down for that kind of nap, because he'd be sleeping with, I'd say with one eye open, but he only has one eye. He'd be sleeping with that like eye cracked, like what's going on with every like nook and cranny and everything. So if he didn't get that really good sleep, which he clearly needed, it would be a little bit of a nightmare to live with him as a puppy, like every puppy.
Yeah, the gate stuff's a good point, Kelly, because it's kind of like we have to take everything else off the menu, right? Like if you have all of these choices available while you're trying to achieve quiet time, it's not going to happen. It's too difficult for puppy to ignore,
Right.
people, traffic, and the other dog moving around, and like you have to find that appropriate setup to help puppy make the rest choice above all things.
Yeah. And this is the room I work in when I'm working with clients. And so when Kazoo was a puppy, behind me, there was my whole X-Pen puppy townhouse setup behind me, because sometimes he could lay in his little bed that I had for him over here, and sometimes he couldn't. And so he would have to go in his little space, and then he would tuck her out and just lay down, as opposed to just kind of milling about and getting into things and doing all these other puppy things when I knew he was tired. Because then he'd want to come up behind me and bite my butt and all of those little things. And he just wasn't able to kind of lay down on his own. But when I put him in his space with all of his stuff in his little puppy playland, he would conk out. So sometimes we have to help them. They're not going to just do it all on their own. So let's see. I want to try to get a couple more questions in here. How do you teach a puppy not to bark in front of a coffee shop?
I think that like as a standalone question, it's quite hard. Because why is the puppy barking?
I just make it clear. I was just quickly typing. So she's really good everywhere else, but if she can see me inside, she will not stop barking. And it's awful because I'm trying to get quickly my coffee and everybody else is plugging their ears because she's going nuts. And I can't figure out, because I know I could do like come to the door and wait for her to be quiet for a bit and treat her, and then go back for a little longer. And if she stays quiet, treat her. But then I'm not sure if I'm coming out, if I'm rewarding the barking.
I would
Lucy, were you
say
taking
maybe it's a little bit of a difficult set of circumstances for your puppy. Sometimes we really want to, take them with us and have them be involved in our human routine. But sometimes, occasionally, we're in a position where we say, oh, you know what, they're not ready for that yet. And that's okay. Like, is it possible that either they don't come to the coffee shop with you when you actually want to get coffee? That's off the menu for a little bit, but you could just take it in smaller steps and say, when I don't want to go in for coffee, I could just go and visit the coffee shop and work on really calm behaviors in this picture, get her or him rehearsing the calm behaviors at an easy level, and then start to add your steps, more progressively. Those days when you do want to get your coffee, puppies may be at home in the pen or with, the alternative caregiver or something like that. The other thing too, though, is if you've got a smaller breed, pick him up, take him in, or sometimes depending on the coffee shop or the management, you can I mean, who's going to deny a cute puppy coming into the coffee shop? You know, just take her in with you, like reward calm behavior while you're ordering your coffee, just like that sort of multitasking and capturing that we were talking about earlier, and just try to create a new set of pieces, you know, to get rid of what you've got right now and reorganize the pieces and see if like a slightly different picture will create more success.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, because the continual rehearsal of the behavior is going to kind of feed into, because barking is very self-reinforcing for dogs and everything. So taking a step back and not letting him or her rehearse that behavior is going to be a big step in helping change that whole picture around. Because sometimes they're just not ready for that. It's just like that Olympic event, but we got to train for it because we're just not quite ready for it yet and everything. And so you mentioned she doesn't do it anywhere else, only at the coffee shop. And so you go into some other stores as well and she's fine. It's just the coffee shop.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So
being able to see me through the glass.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, you can also take someone, like breaking it down into smaller steps, absolutely. Thinking about the emotion behind the behavior, and then potentially taking someone else with you as a step of that, so they can do the training while you've gone inside. Is another way to deal with that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that person can be having them lick on a Kong or doing that whole scatter feeding stuff, like for literally the whole duration of you being in there. You've just got consistent reinforcement going on for mom being at a distance, and then, you know, you're not leaving gaps for her to make those barking decisions. It just depends on where you think she's at, you know, to navigate through which option you choose first.
Yeah, my only worry with the Kong or with the chew stick was that if happens to be another dog that will come near her. She is not food guarder, but that was my only worry, that there could be an issue if I'm not paying attention. Yeah.
Question.
Otherwise, it's a good thank you for all the suggestions.
Yeah, and I think this is definitely something, even for us trainers, would be very hard for us to do on our own while we're in the coffee shop and work on this behavior with the puppy outside. So this is where we would want to enlist like a helper, whether it's you know, somebody that lives in our home or a friend or, you know, a neighbor or something, where, as Jessica was saying, because, you know, that scatter feed, sometimes, again, like we were talking about earlier, people think, well, we're just throwing food at the problem, but we're not, because if you're continually feeding and you're continually feeding, but then maybe the next several times you go, you continually feed, but then you stop and the puppy's going to kind of like pause for a moment and look, and then you reward that very small snapshot of, hey, mom's in the coffee shop. Awesome. Feed, 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 pause. Hey, look, mom's in the coffee shop. Feed, 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 high rate of reinforcement.
Yeah.
And then that person is going to help you. And the great thing about the whole kind of like feeding this way is we don't need any special skills for it, right? We're not trying to time something and then get a yes or a clicker to mark anything. We're just rewarding this puppy. And then when the puppy at one point kind of just stops and looks casually, awesome, boom, we're just going to give you some more goodies. There's no timing involved that we're going to mess anything up. And then you'll just get longer and longer kind of casual looks and more and just watching you at some point. But I think you kind of need a helper with that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I quickly just elaborate on that, like same to basically what everybody else said, but just breaking it down to like those incremental steps. So I think the important thing to always keep in mind is like what we reward is what gets repeated. That's the whole premise of positive reinforcement training. So making sure that the reward is always happening when she's offering what you want, right? Which is being calm. So I would even practice when I don't know if you tie her up when you go inside or what you do, but as you walk away 2 feet, if she stays calm, mark and reward, go back, walk away 4 feet, like really break it down into manageable steps. And once you're in the store, then yes, you'll definitely need that second person, but you can even do half of the training on your own of just really reinforcing that whole behavior until you're fully inside.
And just to reiterate what Kelly already said, that barking is a self-rewarding behavior. So the more we let our dogs bark, the more they're gonna bark, because it's so much fun. Like they really enjoy it. So management in the times when you haven't completed all your training, but you have to go to the coffee shop for your coffee, like thinking about how you can manage that situation so she doesn't get the opportunity to practice the behavior you don't want.
Okay.
Yeah. I think we can maybe squeeze one more question in. A few months ago, one of our dogs started barking every time he heard another dog bark outside, which is very often. We tried redirecting his attention with food and toys. He does pay attention for a sec, but his emotional state remains so high and crazy, then the rest of the pack tags along with the barking and we have absolute chaos. Any suggestion? Ah, yes, there's that barking again. And now everybody's singing. All right, who would like to tackle that one?
Yeah, barking is so hard to deal with because again, it's so rewarding to dogs. I have a Huntaway, and their sole purpose, the sole way that they're defined as a breed here in New Zealand is their ability to bark in a certain way. So my dog will definitely bark at other dogs in the neighborhood if they start barking, if he hears a noise. And the best way that, like, it's really hard for me to manage it. In Wellington where everyone's quite close, so I'm just interrupting with a really fun sound, and then, like as Kelly was saying before, just that snapshot of the behavior that I want, I rewarded it, and now we've essentially just got a sort of quiet command from that, making it a fun noise, something that's high pitched and fun and exciting. And he's like, "What's mum doing? I better go and investigate." And then he gets a reward when he comes back to me.
Yeah, and this is
Yeah, I was going to ask about the location because some dogs, they have those little pedestal areas, right? I mean, Kelly, you were mentioning the window in your room there, and you've got this perfect pedestal of the couch. Like if the dog did want to, raise themselves up to see more through the window. So just I would ask, is it appropriate for my dog to have access to this space, like just randomly throughout the day, to be able to have access to those what we call triggers? It's a little bit more difficult when your dog is very sensitive to auditory stimuli and it's not just a visual trigger. That definitely does make it more of a struggle. But that if that particular dog is the one that starts everything off, he may just need a little bit more management in regard to that access. And then when you do have the time, you could even take him into the space on leash, work on a nice mat behavior, work on like the rehearsal of calm. And so you're really managing what he gets to practice in that particular space.
I'm
Obviously,
sorry.
if it's all throughout the house, it
Yes,
makes it more difficult, but that would be where I might
I'm so
start.
sorry. I don't want to interrupt you. I really appreciate your answer and every information that we're getting. I mean, the problem that we have is that all around the house, every time he hears a dog outside barking, he's not getting any access visually, but he is listening to the dog's bark. And every time he hears one dog bark, even if it's like really, really far away, he starts barking and then he starts running around the house and barking all around the house. So all the dogs and our cats start getting crazy around him. So we've tried like to keep him on a separate bedroom sometimes when we hear the dogs start barking and they're coming, but it's been like a real struggle for us because we haven't found like a way to help him calm down. And even when he takes the food or we start like training or making other noises, he does pay attention, but he's always like shaking and jumping. And even when he's sitting down, he's like shaking. So we haven't found a way to help him regulate that sort of emotion. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a really struggle. I just want to say that I'm sorry to hear that you're going through that because I think that would be a struggle for all of us, even trainers, with a barky dog in a multi-dog household. That's a big challenge. So don't like get down on yourself about, oh gosh, I'm doing something wrong. But for me, other people may have something else to say, but I feel like that is a behavioral modification scenario that requires individual professional help, whether or not you've started that process with somebody or not. Because for me, it sounds like your dog has maybe multiple aspects of the routine and his response to stimuli that need to be addressed coming out of the just this isolated issue and addressing things from a bigger perspective. I think that that particular scenario is quite complicated for us to be able to answer in this particular scenario, but I feel like with the right professional assistance in the home, that is something that can be tackled.
Yeah,
I agree. I think that's something for for someone to come and see you, particularly if he's as you said, he's shaking and things like that. That sounds like there's some big emotion
That
behind
was
that
the
which
red
needs
flag
to
for
be
me
dealt
as
with.
well.
Yeah. That's what I was going to say.
I would be wondering if that may be a veterinary behaviorist situation, particularly if the dog is shaking and becoming that overwhelmed from such a distance. I would be thinking maybe that is a situation where you may want to seek the assistance of a vet behaviorist.
Yeah, that's what I was going to suggest. Is possibly the vet behaviorist as the first stop. As I think it was Jessica that said that shaking was the red flag for me, because there's probably some anxiety going on here as well. And so a board certified veterinary behaviorist would be a great first stop. You can have a full workup at your vet first to make sure there's no other underlying medical things going on as a first stop. But I always like to make sure that everybody knows that there's a difference between a veterinarian and a veterinary behaviorist, a board certified veterinary behaviorist. They're very specialized. And so I love my veterinarian to pieces. I would recommend him to anybody. But if I had more of a behavioral challenge going on that I needed to seek some help with, I would make sure my dog had a full vet workup first to make sure there's no other underlying medical issues. And then I would go see a board certified veterinary behaviorist and work with them on a plan. And then what you can do is you'll get a trainer that is versed in behavior that can help you execute that plan, because that's important as well. It's not just finding any trainer that can help with something like this. You're going to want somebody that understands behavior and can help with behavior modification. So this isn't something you're going to command your way out of, like, focus on me, watch me, stay, or anything like that. This is going to be a bit different in everything. So board certified veterinary behaviorists will often work with trainers who are versed in behavior, because the board certified veterinary behaviorists are the first to tell you that they're not trainers. They can help you write a plan, but they don't know how to execute them. And that's where behavioral professionals will come in to help you execute that plan as well. So
I just want to add to, like, my dog personally has really bad noise phobia. Like she does the full shaking. I have a video on my YouTube channel about noise conditioning, and I've literally talked about how, like, any new appliance I get in the house, because my dog's really sensitive to beeping sounds, I've had to condition every single one. So, like, if I get a new microwave, if I get a new fridge, any kind of new beep, I have to teach her to be okay with that. So I just wanted to mention that that might be useful too, because it really breaks down how to start at such a level that your dog can handle and then progress to what would be real world levels of, like, the dog barking outside. But you're not going to start with the actual dogs barking. Like I usually suggest, we're starting with like a recording on your phone so you can manipulate the volume and start at a level that your dog can handle while associating it with treats and things that are positive, and then build from there. But this question's personal to me because, yeah, it's one of my biggest struggles with my own dog is very, very sound sensitive.
And with regards to having that barking on, like a recording, and since your dog is very sensitive to those neighbor barks, recording that and using that at a lower volume versus just any dog barking that you can download on the internet, because that's going to sound different than neighbor barks. So recording the very sound that's startling or upsetting to your dog, and then working with that at a very low volume. And I'll just add, in the meantime, because I know you're living where it sounds like you're very in close proximity to all this barking. So it sounds like you're having a hard time getting a break from it, because it's just constantly happening. But if you can, we always talk about management, and something like a gate isn't going to work here, but something like having some music on, or the TV's on, or fans on, can help filter out some of that. So that way they're not hypersensitive to every little bark. And some of them are still going to get through, but if you can mask some of those, it's going to keep that rehearsal of the behavior down of, there's a little woof, I'm going to bark at that also. So you might be able to help eliminate some of those sounds from coming in to prevent the rehearsal of that behavior, which can be really helpful as well.
I just add
Thank
as
you
well
so
onto
much.
Stephanie's point about conditioning, positive associations with the sound of the barking on low volume. Sometimes I'll even go a step further and say, let's just do that with a bunch of other sounds and let's just get like sound is okay. The hearing noise and things is not something I need to be scared of, and working up to that main trigger, which is the barking, because that would be something to go through with a trainer. Is your dog sensitive to this barking specifically, or does he have some general noise sensitivity, where he's reacting even at lower levels to other types of noise, that all of that could be delved into.
From a music point of view as well, there's particular genres. So soft rock and reggae have been shown to be the most
Yeah,
calming
reggae.
for dogs. Classical music too, but more recently it's been soft rock and reggae. So if you can play some of that, that may be more beneficial than some other types of music for your dog.
Yeah. So I would definitely start there for sure, to try to give you some sanity as well, and to give your dog a break from some of those, and let's face it, if we're sitting here, like if I wasn't talking right now with you guys, it'd be really quiet in here. It'd be really easy to hear any kind of outside noise coming in. And so helping mask some of that's going to be your first line of defense. So,
There's been a comment in the chat from Susan about white noise machines as well. So there's a fantastic researcher, Eileen Anderson, who's done a lot of stuff on noise sensitivity, and she's actually found that brown noise machines are more effective. So utilizing brown noise as a way of sort of covering up some of this stuff, whether that be barking or fireworks or thunder or whatever, is a really good alternative to a white noise. And yeah, there's some really interesting information coming out now about noise sensitivity in dogs.
Definitely. Well, we have to run. So thank you everybody for joining us today. And I want to thank our guest speakers for taking the time and the extra time that you took today to chat with everybody. I really appreciate it. And so I'm glad you could all make it with us. So thanks everybody. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye.
Please let me know in the comments if you found this discussion helpful. If you want to see a one-on-one chat that I had with Kelly about leash training, I'll link that here. I will also link my full puppy training playlist as well. Happy training. I'll see you in the next video.